Welcome to Madame Raven's. This way to the library. She's been expecting you.
The Screaming Peace by Davies of Tainted Tales. My darlings, it's been a while since we've heard from Tainted Tales. They were, I think, the very first authors who actually reached out to me, and I so appreciate them for that. They say foul things of old times still lurk in dark, forgotten corners of the world, and gates still gape to loose on certain nights shapes pent in hell. Justin Jeffrey. Scarlet Jane was what they call white trash. Well, that's the view from people on the outside looking in. The reality is Scarlet was just another unfortunate. I guess the way she dressed didn't help her none. Or maybe it was a notorious area she came from. It was wildly known to be a neighborhood where vice runs wild. That being said, she did have a job of sorts, paid her rent and put food on the table. She was a pretty decent person, it would seem, and had never been in any real trouble. Well, that's up until this time. Despite this, there was an undercurrent of turmoil and torment inside her. It had shadowed her all her life, although no one could quite place it. The girl did have an unsettling way about her, though. It was like some unwritten prophecy. Weird, I know. But that's the feeling you got around Scarlet. It started one night on her way back home from the gentleman's club. She'd been working part-time as a hostess. Scarlet was dressed in high-heel fishnet stockings and a tight leather miniskirt. Very attractive, if that's your kind of thing. Scarlet swished her long blonde hair around, bunched it up, and click-clacked down the alleyway. The girl stopped to light up a cigarette. It was then Scarlet got her first taste of menace. Trash cans clattered and papers brushed their way over the sidewalk. The alley offset was narrow and sparsely lit, but she entered it nonetheless. It was a humid night in Baltimore. An old street light spluttered its glow onto an old Cadillac. The car had been left derelict and was now used by the homeless and druggies as a place to crash. Scarlet gave the Cadillac a wide berth. It's then she heard the footsteps behind her. Muggings were commonplace in this part of town, she recalled. Her body now became taut. Her heart pounded as a quiver ran through her. Then she heard deep breathing and a stifled snigger which made her strut quicken. Scarlet stumbled in her heels. The footsteps seemed to be gaining, then stopped dead. She patted herself down, flattened her blouse, and strutted onward into the night. The footsteps started up again, this time quicker steps. Scarlet daredn't look back. She was afraid of what she might see. She slipped off her heels and began to run barefoot. A wheezing breath could be heard chasing her down. Soon he'd be on top of her. Only one more corner and she'd be at her flat. Nothing would happen there. She had friends. In panic, the girl ran up to the tarnished green door and fumbled with her keys, trying to get in. The keys fell to the floor. She was a trembling mess. She looked around, but the streets were dead. Scarlet opened the door barely ajar and slipped in, slamming the door shut. Instinct kicked in, and she stood pushing her hands against the door. Frantically, she slipped the chain and deadbolt, her chest rising and falling at a hectic pace. Just as she was securing the door, it slammed loudly, making the door jolt. It crashed over and over. The man was not finished yet. Scarlet pounded her fist against the door. It was then her neighbors came out, wanting to know what the commotion was. Scarlet ran upstairs and locked herself in her room. A hard drink is what she needed now to calm her quivering nerves. Scarlet was safe for now. Well, that's what she thought. The boys from downstairs knocked on the door and said, "Yo, Scarlet, that dude has been taken care of." The guys always watched out for her. She uttered the words, "Good, he freaked me out." They banged on the door and she banged back, "Anytime, Scarlet, anytime. We got your back." She sat on the arm of her old leather couch. The girls switched on the television. Scarlet flicked through the stations, manically with the remote. Every once in a while she'd stop if something caught her eye. Before long she'd started to get to the dead channels. They just fizzed and hissed at her. She scrolled through them and was just about to go back to her favorite soap. Then a channel she'd not seen before, slowly visualizing itself through the interference. She gulped in shock. Before her eyes, what she saw engaged and chilled her at the same time. What she was watching was akin to a snuff film. There was supposed to be nothing like this around anymore. But how do you monitor that kind of thing? The people in it are nameless monsters and faceless victims. The reality is no one cares about the insignificant. The homeless and druggies are easy prey. But what she was viewing repulsed her to the pits of her soul. This was the most macabre thing Scarlet had ever seen. The footage took place in a dark room. It looked like a storage unit. A bare bulb light was swinging. The place was silent. In the center of the room was a child with a hunched figure on it, mournfully sobbing. As the bulb swung, it cast scattering shadows, partially revealing the outline of the figure's body. It was a woman. She had a Hessian bag on her head, and her sobs were muffled by the bag and a gag of some kind. The footage panned in closer for a frontal shot. You could see the girl's eyes blink and dart side to side as she peered through the slits in the bag. Above the skylight had been covered over. The flaking paint was now shedding sunlight. The rays leapt in, scratching at anything they'd touched, or catch eating up the darkness. Then came heavy footsteps. A man in jackboots dressed in black strode into the room with a mask on. He started to breathe slowly and deep, but did not say a word. Then he walked out again. The girl must have been drugged as she drifted in and out of wakefulness. The girl wept at her plight. She sniffled and tried to breathe at the same time. She must have needed air badly now with that gag in her mouth. But still, Scarlet decided to watch on. Jackboots and rattling could be heard getting closer. Then the man barged into the room with a surgical trolley. On it he had measures of tools and surgical equipment. He grunted and shuntered, lashing out at the air before picking up scalpel of the trolley. Frenzied, he stalked around the room like a caged animal before moving on to his prey. Scarlet turned off the TV. A short while passed, and the lure of the station gave her the urge to turn the television back on. The channel had gone. She'd scrolled through the channels transfixed. It was like a hysteria had come over her. It took quite a while, but she found the station again. She sat before the TV on her knees, taking in a sharp intake of breath. The girl drew her face close to the screen, shaking her head in denial. Clear as day, Scarlet saw the man take off the Hessian hood. The camera shot zoomed in and panned around. It was then she recognized the girl. The girl in the snuff film was her. The first and only time the man spoke was when he said, "Scarlet Jane, you are going to die the most dreadful death." After hearing the man's gravelly voice, she collapsed with a bang on the coffee table. Scarlet lay strewn across the floor for an hour or two. When she finally stirred, only vague recollections of what she'd seen remained. It was like some hazy migraine or a nightmare. She placed her face in the pits of her palms and wept. What she needed now was a shower, freshen her body and mind up. It was the best remedy Scarlett could think of. Just as she was leaving the shower, wrapped in a towel, she heard the fizzing of the television. It seemed to draw her in again. Images scattered across her mind. They were evil visions, and the girl believed she was becoming possessed. Scarlett remembered the room with the masked man and the scene she was in. She recalled the gravelly voice saying, "Scarlett Jane, you are going to die the most dreadful death." The girl went to the drawer by her bed. She'd a Smith & Wesson short snub in there. The gun had gone, vanished into thin air. Paranoia was setting in. She believed there was hidden cameras in her flat. The girl decided she would not leave the flat. The next day she phoned in sick. The boss gave her a lot of grief, but it wasn't like hostess jobs were hard to come by. It went on like this for days, and days merged into nights. She looked pale and gaunt and yellow-skinned and lay cocooned on her sofa, motionless, staring at the screen. Cold pizza lay on the floor on a plate, flies buzzing around it before actually settling on the bottles of cola. Scarlett just kept watching the screen. Somehow it had gotten its hooks into her. It was like some strange addiction. The station was turning Scarlett into a degenerate. Now the footage had changed and there was different scenes. It was like some weird reality show with a deranged twist. The scenes flitted back and forth. One was a home invasion. Another was a drug bust gone wrong. The most enduring were a creepy foreign hospital and a car crash on a bridge outside of town. Two cars were pictured racing. They barged and bumped into each other until one went off a bridge. Names and places were hidden. The quality was low. As to a clue what it was about, there is none. The god-awful screams are what troubled the girl the most. She rolled on the floor, cupping her ears. Then the chanting began. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, Scarlett said unnervingly. Then she muttered, "They will come for me." The girl feared for her life and paced the room anxiously. In the corner of the room was an intercom system. Amidst the fuzzy image she could see men in black coming up the stairs. They banged on her door, hammering on it over and over. It freaked Scarlett out, but she went into the bathroom and locked the door. Did she have a sixth sense? Maybe it was just hysteria. Anyway, when the door smashed open, it was not masked men. It was Baltimore's drug squad doing a raid. But what they found unearthed their deepest fears. The fragility of a person's mind, given the wrong set of circumstances. It could happen to anyone. But when they entered the bathroom, this is what they gazed upon. The girl was hanging with an electric cable from a shower rail. Before them, the last ounce of life were choked out of her twitching body. They cut her down and lowered her into the bath. She was still alive, but her breath was stunted. The girl was going to die. Her face yellowed and eyes were sunken and circled. Despite her young age, the girl's forehead seemed veined and corrugated. The face of terror lay before them. An officer asked, "Why did you do this? What do you remember?" She whispered, "It was in the blackness. All I saw was the car I was in crashing." She beckoned one officer closer. "The last thing I recall is the poor people dying." They said, "There was no crash." She said, "Oh, it must have been the weird TV," and died. An officer said, "Another deranged chick. You get all sorts around here." Another said, "I wish I could believe that, sir. It would help my shaky nerves." How could I forget what I witnessed? Guess I'll never feel alone or settled again. Even now, a hideous sense of dark often comes chillingly upon me. And then, silence. So quoth this raven. Thank you so much, my darlings, for coming to visit me. It's always nice to have you in my chateau. It means so much to me that you would spend your time listening to me. And special thanks to my Patreon supporters, Ermin, Darren and Jennifer, Laura, Mutant Artificial Intelligence, Tabby Cat, and of course, to Charlotte Emerson and Cortez Williams. Good night, my darlings.